Hi there. I'd just like to talk to you about the book, The Jewish Radical Tradition, which Janey and myself have written. At first sight, this book appears to be a relatively niche subject. It starts roughly in 1881, finishes in 1948, and it's about radical Jews. And there aren't many of us around these days, so why bother? But actually, I think there are immediate issues that it addresses. First one, obviously, is Gaza and the horrific onslaught by Israel. And of course, Israel claims to represent all Jews and a 2,000-year-old yearning for Jews to be with other Jews in Palestine. And to say anything different is anti-Semitic. So that's the first issue that we take on, if you like. Second one is the rise of the far right. Anti-Semitism hasn't disappeared from 1930s and so on. It's the ideological glue that seems to give to right-wing extremists anyway, an explanation for the miseries of capitalism that are experienced, that somewhere behind the scenes there's an all-powerful Jewish conspiracy. And I wrote the book from a British perspective, which is to do with the destruction of Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader. And he was destroyed basically by allegations of anti-Semitism. But there's a wider theory around the so-called theory of the anti-Semitism of the left. So the book addresses all three and I think blasts a hole in all of them. How do we do that? Well, let's start with the first one about Israel representing all Jewish history. Actually, it doesn't. It is a complete break from it. What we look at is the real Jewish history, the mass activities from a wide range of countries, far from Jews wanting to run away from anti-Semitic persecution to hide in Palestine. They stood and they fought where they were. Or if that became impossible, they became refugees and went to the United States. A simple statistic can illustrate that. Most of the 11 million Jews in the world pre-World War I stayed where they were. Of those that moved, it was about a quarter. Only 1 in 27 chose to go to Palestine, which had at the time the highest concentration of Jews per head. The rest went anywhere else. I'm in the UK because my parents came here. Janey is in Australia. My mother was born in South Africa, and so it goes. Zionism was detested by the radical Jews of the Jewish Labour Bund and by the left. These were organizations that fought anti-Semitism where it was rather than running away from it. Second aspect, remember about the far right. The far right sees Jews as manipulating everybody else. Actually, when you look at the detail, the contrary is true. Jews threw themselves into solidarity and struggle with non-Jews on a vast scale. Haven't got time to look at the details, but you look at the strikes, the resistance movements, and so on, and so it goes. And also intellectual contributions. Think about the role of Marx, Trotsky, and Luxemburg. But again, I can offer some statistics. The main concentration of Jews were in Tsarist Russia. They were 4% of the population. Remember that, 4%. Okay, 1/3 of the Narodniks, this is the pre-Marxist revolutionary movement, that were arrested were Jewish. In the 1905 revolution, 1/3 of the arrests, again, were Jews. But let's move the continent. 50% of the American Communist Party in the interwar period was Jewish. And I can't resist mentioning South Africa for the reasons I've already given. Jews were 0.3% of the total population. But when Nelson Mandela was put on trial, a mass trial, every single Jew in the court on trial was Jewish. Okay, let's move on to the final argument that the left is anti-Semitic. Actually, the history shows that it was the left, and clearly not the Zionists, that fought anti-Semitism, and that anti-Semitism came from the very establishment that now denounces the left. It would do. It's the establishment. It hates the left. In Russia, it was the 1917 revolution and the Bolsheviks that were the first to outlaw anti-Semitism by law. And they smashed the anti-Semitic forces, for example, in the Ukraine that killed 200,000 Jews, wounded 700,000 others, and left 300,000 orphans. It was the Bolsheviks that defeated and fought back against that wave. It was the left that fought Franco in the Spanish Civil War. Significantly, 1/4 of the international brigades were Jewish. And it was the left, as Janey shows in her section, that joined with non-Jews to resist Hitler throughout, not only in the 1930s, but throughout the war itself. So to return to the present, The establishment pretends that everything that's happening in Gaza today stems from the 7th of October, 2023. We, of course, point out that to understand, you need to go back to the blockade and to the early 2000s and the mass killings that have happened since then. But you don't stop there. You need to go actually back to 1967 or indeed 1948 to understand, if you like, the Palestine-Israel issue. But we'd argue that to really understand today's events in the round, all the three things that I've talked about, you need to go back to 1881 and the Jewish radical tradition, which was launched then and is still with us, if in theory, if not in huge physical presence, in every struggle against oppression and exploitation that exists. Thank you.